So, every farm owner I've ever worked with came in thinking that they had the same problem. They were either too involved, too busy, or can't step back from their farm. And on the surface, that's true for all of them. But underneath that, when we get to the actual audit, what I find is three completely different problems with three completely different causes and three completely different fixes. And here's what matters: the fix for one of them will make the other two worse if you apply the wrong sequence. So, before touching anything in your farm, before you document a single process or try to hand off a single client, you need to know which one is your primary bottleneck. And by the end of this video, you will. So, when I identified a farm's owner primary bottleneck, the first thing that it tells me is their goal. Not their stated goal, but their real goal. The thing they've actually been trying to project. Because every bottleneck exists for a reason. Think about it. Nobody became the operational center of their farm by accident. They became it because at every decision point, consciously or not, they chose to hold something rather than release it. And that choice was driven by something that they valued. Decision bottleneck owners are trying to protect control. I mean, not because they are like these power hungry people, but because they've seen what happens when decisions get made without the right judgment behind them. They've cleaned up enough mistakes to know what releasing control without the right infrastructure in place is how the farm loses clients. The knowledge bottleneck, the owners are trying to protect their standard. They are carrying the operational intelligence of the farm because nobody else has demonstrated they can carry it to the same level. Every time they've tried to transfer it, the output wasn't right, so they naturally pull back. Relationship bottleneck owners are protecting trust. Those they are built by those client relationships over years and decades of just client service. The clients that are there, or the clients that are there because of them specifically. And the idea of transitioning those clients' relationships feels like handing something irreplaceable to someone who might not treat them the same way. Three bottlenecks, three goals, three completely legitimate fears. And the reason most fixes fail is they don't address the fear, they address the symptom. You can't fix a decision bottleneck by telling someone to delegate more. You fix it by building the infrastructure that makes releasing control safe. You can't fix a knowledge bottleneck by asking someone to document their process. You fix it by extracting the judgment, not just the steps, in a way that actually transfers. You can't fix a relationship bottleneck by introducing a team member to a client. You fix it by engineering a transfer of trust, not just a transfer of contact information. Here's my number, here's my Gmail, here's my Gmail, 7 documents, bam. Different problem, different fix, different sequence. Now let's identify yours. The decision bottleneck. Here is how you know that this is your primary constraint. So, work stops moving when you're unavailable. Your team comes to you not because they lack the capability, but because they lack the authority or the framework. They know roughly what to do, they just don't know if they are allowed to do it, or they have been banned before for doing it without asking. The big tell is this. So think about the last time a team member made a call independently and it was wrong. What happened? If your answer is you stepped in, corrected it, and it never happened, and it never fully happened again without you, you've trained your team to wait. And that's not failure, that's a system you built without realizing. Now, here is the goal underneath this bottleneck. You are protecting quality outcomes through personal oversight. And you're right on that. You're right that your oversight should matter. The question is whether your oversight has to mean you, or whether it can mean a documented decision framework that your team uses independently. The farm isn't releasing control. The fix is encoding your judgment into the infrastructure so the control transfers to the system, not to a person who might use it differently than you would. Decision bottleneck owners make the fastest progress once they accept that distinction. Because the work is specific, map the decisions, build the frameworks, test them, and then the bottleneck closes systematically. Now, the second one is the knowledge bottleneck. Here's how you know this is your team's primary constraint. Your team is capable, right? They execute on defined work. But the moment something fails outside that standard case, an unusual client situation, a judgment call with a gray area, an exception to the normal process, it routes to you immediately. Every time, because the answer only exists in your head. And the more experienced you get, the worse this becomes. Because every year you add more pattern recognition, more judgment, more institutional memory, and none of it is transferable in its current form. But tell us this. Think about the last time a new staff member asked you a question that surprised you. Not because it was a bad question, but because you realized you'd never considered that someone wouldn't know the answer. And that's the gap between what feels obvious to you and what your team actually has to access. That is your knowledge concentration. The goal underneath this bottleneck is protecting your standards. You have seen what happens when someone without your experience makes a call that they weren't ready for. The output wasn't right. The client noticed, or you noticed, and you concluded that the only safe way to maintain quality was to stay involved. And that conclusion, my friend, was correct, given the infrastructure you had at that particular time. Now, this fix isn't documenting your process. Processes are the easy part. The fix is extracting your judgment, the scenarios, the exceptions, the reasoning behind the decision that looks simple from the outside, but anything from the inside. That is what we did 2 weeks ago with the knowledge extraction interview. That is the starting point for this type of bottleneck. And the last one, the heavy one. This is the relationship bottleneck. And here's how you know that this is your primary constraint. Your longest standing clients have your cell number. They call you directly, not the firm. When something feels off, they want you specifically, not because your team is incompetent, but because the trust was built with you personally. And those clients have never been given a reason to extend that trust to anyone else. The tell is this. Think about your firm's top 5 clients. If you try to reduce your involvement with any of them tomorrow, just genuinely reduce it. Not just introduce a team member. How will they respond? If the honest answer is resistance, well, you have a relationship bottleneck. And the goal underneath is this. You're trying to, protecting trust. Specifically, trust that took years to build and that you're not willing to risk for the sake of an organizational chart. And that is not an unreasonable position. That trust is real. Most relationships are real. But here is what I need you to understand about this type of bottleneck. The trust isn't in you as a person. It's the experience those clients have when they work with you. The responsiveness, the understanding of the specific situation, the sense that someone actually knows them. That experience in itself is transferable, not instantly, not carelessly, but deliberately, through a structured handoff process that engineers the transfer of trust rather than just the transfer of contact information. The client doesn't need you specifically. They need what you provide. And what you provide can be embedded into how your team works. If you build the handoff in the right way. Now, which one is yours? And don't say all three. Every firm has all three to some degree. I'm asking which one is your heaviest. Which one, if you fix tomorrow, will change the most about how your firm operates? If work stops because decisions wait for you, you have that decision bottleneck. If edge cases and exceptions only route to you because nobody else has the judgment, well, that's a knowledge bottleneck. If your most important client relationships will fracture if you step back, that's a relationship bottleneck. Now, write it down. One word, decision, knowledge, or relationship. That word determines everything that comes out next, the sequence of fixes, where we start the extraction work, which part of the methodology applies. And it also tells you something about your goal, what you're protecting, what the fix needs to preserve it are, not just solve. Because the owners who make the fastest progress aren't the ones who are trying to fix everything at once. They're the ones who identify the primary constraint, fix it completely, and move to the next one. And that is the sequence. So, one word, write it down. Decision, knowledge, or relationship. That is your primary bottleneck, and that's where we start. Thursday, we go into the decision bottleneck specifically, how to build the framework that replaces your judgment without losing your standard, step by step. The dependency score is in the description, maps all three bottlenecks across all 7 lenses and 5 lenses, and it tells you exactly which one is your highest concentration. It takes 8 minutes. Links below. I'll see you on Thursday.